Welcome back, Coinology. The camera slowly fades in on the surface of a single coin resting under a soft beam of light, the metal catching every shimmer like a miniature time capsule waiting to be opened. The voice begins with a low, steady tone, inviting viewers closer, pulling them into the hypnotic copper glow of a single 1-cent piece. The 1987 D. Lincoln cent, an ordinary coin at first glance, but one that, in the world of rare errors, collector fantasies, and myth-like discoveries, has been whispered about with an almost unbelievable price tag that stretches into massive, unimaginable figures, even as high as $76,000 million in mythical market settings where rarity becomes legend and a tiny piece of copper becomes a treasure of epic proportions. The story begins not with hype, but with history, with the quiet journey of a coin born in 1987, struck at the Denver Mint, its D mint mark etched like a signature, certifying its birthplace and its path into circulation across millions of hands, pockets, cash registers, and the everyday lives of Americans. The coin feels small, but every detail carved into it carries decades of meaning. In 1987, the United States Mint was operating at full capacity, pressing out billions of coins, including over a billion 1987 D cents. For most people, a penny is just a penny. It buys nothing alone. It gets tossed aside, dropped in cars, lost in couches, thrown into jars, even discarded without a second thought. But this particular penny, this exact date, this exact mint mark, holds a deeper story because collectors know that even the most common things can become extraordinary when tiny flaws, perfectly timed circumstances, and historical context collide. This is where the magic begins. When the video invites viewers to imagine one specific 1987 D cent, not just any coin but the one that rises above all others because of high-grade preservation, accidental minting errors, and the mysterious allure of coins that seem impossibly perfect, the script begins to slow down, letting the viewer feel the weight of this tiny object. Speaking of weight, the 1987 D cent is part of the post-1982 era of copper-plated zinc pennies, weighing only 2.50 grams, a composition of 97.5% zinc with a thin 2.5% copper plating that gives it its familiar reddish tone. The change in composition from the previous era of solid bronze pennies marked an important shift in American coinage history. Rising metal prices forced the mint to abandon the heavier alloy, resulting in the modern lightweight pennies people carry today. This transformation created a distinct dividing line in the world of collectors, making each year after 1982 a part of the modern zinc era, where errors become even more dramatic due to the fragile nature of the coin's core. Zinc, unlike copper, can bubble, crack, corrode, split, and produce fascinating mint anomalies, each one a potential treasure. The video's voice dives deeper, talking about the simple yet iconic design that has lived on the cent since 1909, when Victor David Brenner sculpted the bust of Abraham Lincoln. His initials, VDB, were originally placed boldly on the reverse but later moved subtly to the shoulder of the portrait. By 1987, this design had already been in circulation for 78 years. The obverse holds Lincoln's profile facing right, with the word Liberty stamped beside him, the date 1987 to the left, and the tiny mint mark D beneath it. Above him stands the unwavering motto "In God We Trust," a phrase that has traveled through American history as a reminder of ideals, faith, and national identity. Flip the coin, and the reverse features the imposing Lincoln Memorial, a structure not just drawn, but meticulously carved with columns, shadows, and even a tiny statue of Lincoln visible at its center. The words United States of America curve proudly across the top, while E Pluribus Unum rests just below, and the denomination 1 cent is set boldly at the bottom, giving the penny its unmistakable presence. The narrator continues, explaining how billions were made, yet only a microscopic fraction survive in conditions so perfect that they appear freshly minted, untouched by circulation, as though frozen in time. These are the coins that collectors chase, the ones sent to grading agencies like PCGS or NGC, sealed in protective holders, labeled with grades like MS66, MS67, MS68, and the ultimate dream, MS69 or higher. For a modern penny, reaching such grades is almost impossible. Even tiny marks invisible to the eye can reduce a coin's score. And yet, in the world of collectors, one minuscule difference can turn a coin's value from a simple cent to something worth thousands, or in mythical, dramatic storytelling, values exaggerated to the realm of fantasy, reaching numbers that make viewers gasp. The tone shifts as the script reveals the dramatic idea behind the mythical $76,000 million valuation. An imagined scenario where a flawless 1987 D cent, struck with a full brockage, double die, off-planchet error, copper transitional anomaly, or any mixture of extremely rare minting miracles, is discovered in pristine condition inside a sealed original mint bag after decades of storage. Collectors speculate wildly about coins like these, imagining what the market would do if such a specimen ever surfaced. The narrator speaks as if telling a legend, a myth passed among treasure hunters, the kind of tale that leaves viewers leaning forward, eager to know more. What if such a coin existed? What if the price reached astronomical levels because only one perfect example ever survived? What if this tiny copper-plated disc became the holy grail of modern pennies? The video invites the viewer to journey through scenes, old minting machines clashing with rhythmic precision in 1987, bags of coins being sealed and shipped across the nation, some entering circulation, others forgotten in safes, drawers, and sealed collections. Somewhere, maybe in a dusty attic, a forgotten coin jar, or a collection passed down through generations, a single flawless coin may still rest, waiting. Collectors often say that the stories behind coins are more valuable than the metal itself, and this script takes the viewer into those stories. It talks about a time when the country was transitioning technologically, economically, and culturally. The 1980s were years of transformation, new technology, new politics, new forms of entertainment, new thinking. This penny, minted in 1987, quietly witnessed the era of cassette tapes, arcade machines, VHS movies, early computers, and a world evolving rapidly. Every 1-cent piece carried the fingerprints of millions of Americans moving through everyday life. The script grows even more immersive, describing the microscopic details on the coin, how the copper layer wraps around the zinc core like a thin metallic skin, how imperfections can arise from plating bubbles, die polishing lines, planchet flaws, and Wichtertide value $76,000 million simply because the hypothetical coin is believed to be the only flawless, error-rich specimen ever discovered. It becomes a symbol, not of money, but of rarity, fascination, and the thrill that collectors chase. The script weaves this value into the story like a legend, something unbelievable, yet captivating. The tone becomes slower, more dramatic, the camera zooming close to the coin as if the viewer can feel the ridges of Lincoln's coat, the smooth curve of the date, the crisp punch of the Denver D mint mark. Every pore on Lincoln's bust becomes a canyon, every line becomes a river of copper. The voice describes how collectors use loupes, microscopes, lighting angles, and magnification to study the tiniest details, searching for anything unique. The video's narrative transitions to the market, describing how penny collectors, known as numismatists, fuel bidding wars, push values higher, and treat coins like pieces of living history. Auctions across the world display rare cents, from 1909 VDBs to 1972 double dies to 1983 copper transition errors, and each sale becomes part of the backdrop that fuels the excitement around discoveries like a perfect 1987-D die in the dramatic style you want. The script emphasizes that markets fluctuate, rarity drives demand, and stories drive excitement. The narrator paints a picture where this coin becomes a symbol of ultimate luck, the kind of discovery every viewer dreams of finding in their pocket. It's not just about money, it's about the hunt, and as the video slowly approaches the end of part 1, the voice lowers again, reminding viewers that the most legendary treasures often hide in the most ordinary places. A penny worth a cent today might become a fortune tomorrow. A simple coin might be the key to a story larger than anyone expects. And the journey. The light shifts gently across the surface of the 1987 descent as the story continues, the camera gliding slowly past each detail like an explorer drifting through a world carved in metal. The voice grows deeper, inviting the viewer further into the vast universe behind this tiny coin. As part 2 begins, the narration returns to the idea that sometimes the rarest treasures are not diamonds or gold bars locked inside massive vaults, but small, everyday objects hidden in plain sight. A penny, dismissed by millions, can sit quietly for decades before revealing its secret to the one person who looks closely enough. The 1987 descent, with its humble weight of 2.50 grams, becomes a key that opens a door into American history, numismatic obsession, and the type of legendary value that only the most mythical collectors whisper about in rare circles. The narrator explains that the Denver Mint, responsible for the D mint mark, was known for its incredible production levels, striking hundreds of millions of coins per year. Because of the sheer volume, the possibility of unusual minting moments increases, even if only by fractions of fractions. Somewhere in the vast machinery, a die might crack for just a moment, creating a raised line across Lincoln's portrait. Somewhere else, a blank planchet might slip into position slightly off-center, producing a misaligned strike. A little dust, a tiny fragment, a smear of grease, these are the small accidents that create legends. And the story unfolds that among the countless machines working tirelessly, there could have been a moment in 1987 when something incredible happened, something unnoticed, unrecorded, a perfect storm of minting conditions that produced a coin unlike any other. The screen slowly cuts to archival footage of mint workers in the 1980s, operating heavy presses, inspecting bags of coins, guiding conveyors of glittering cents that pour like rivers of copper. This imagery blends with the narrator's dramatic tone, drawing the audience even deeper into the world of coin creation. The viewers feel the vibration of the presses, the heat radiating from the machinery, the thunderous clashing of metal striking metal with thousands of pounds of force. They hear how every strike carries history forward, but only a few carry mystery. Returning to the 1987 descent, the script continues to enlarge the myth. It paints a vivid picture of a collector who, decades earlier, unknowingly set aside a bag of pennies, thinking nothing of it. Perhaps they worked at the mint, or perhaps they simply liked saving new coins each year. Decades later, the bag sits untouched in a dusty wooden drawer, the paper yellowed with age, the ink faded. One day the bag is discovered, opened, and among the sea of copper, one coin gleams different from the rest. It looks flawless. Mint state perfection. No scratches, no blemishes, no contact marks, just untouched, frozen beauty. A coin that appears as though it escaped the fate of circulation entirely and was preserved by time itself. This is where the legend of unimaginable value begins. The narrator then expands the story even more, describing the emotional reaction collectors feel when they find something extraordinary. The heart races. The mind jumps between excitement and disbelief. The hands tremble slightly, knowing they may be holding something priceless. The camera zooms in slowly, showing a magnified view of Lincoln's eye, then the smooth curve of the date, then the crisp outline of the Denver mint mark. The narrator's voice softens, almost whispering, creating tension as if every viewer might discover something similar in their own pocket. The script describes how collectors often talk about the perfect strike. This is a moment when the dies align flawlessly, the pressure is ideal, the planchet is perfect, and the result is a coin that looks like a masterpiece. For modern zinc cents, perfection is incredibly rare because the soft metal bruises easily, even during the minting process itself. This makes high-grade coins from 1987D extraordinarily difficult to find in pristine condition. The narrator speaks about how surface integrity, luster quality, and strike sharpness all determine a coin's grade, and how the highest grades become unbelievably valuable. Even though billions were minted, only a microscopic handful may survive in nearly perfect form. The story deepens as the script explains how the coin market operates on psychology, rarity, demand, and the thrill of discovery. There are coins today worth thousands or millions not because of their metal, but because of their impossible condition or dramatic errors. The narrator draws a parallel, using emotional pacing to enhance the mystery surrounding the mythical astronomical valuation of the 1987 cent. It describes secret auctions, private collectors competing behind closed doors, serious investors making offers that sound surreal. A coin like this becomes a legend, a symbol of ultimate rarity, a beacon for treasure hunters. The narrator leans into the emotional force of the tale, describing how the Lincoln Cent series is beloved worldwide. People collect them because they are simple, affordable, historical, and beautifully designed. Every child in America has held one. Every adult has dozens stored somewhere: jars, drawers, pockets, dusty corners of cars, coin pouches. The familiarity makes rare examples even more electrifying because they represent the extraordinary hiding inside the ordinary. The scene shifts to the technical discussion of minting errors that could elevate the value of a 1987 cent dramatically. The narrator goes into detail about double dies, where the coin appears to have two overlapping images, a result of a misalignment during die creation. It explains off-center strikes where part of the design is missing, creating dramatic visual distortions. Broad strikes flatten the coin, making it appear wider. Wrong planchet strikes are considered the holy grail. Imagine a penny struck on a dime blank or a copper planchet left over from pre-1982 minting. The voice speaks softly, slowly, letting each term sink in like treasure chest keys, unlocking one by one. Each type of error becomes part of the story, a potential explanation for why one particular 1987D could rise to legendary value. What if a single coin combined multiple anomalies: perfect strike, rare die trait, flawless preservation, and a dramatic error? The narrator uses this hypothetical scenario to weave a sense of wonder, reminding viewers that the world of numismatics is full of surprises that defy expectations. This is how myths are born. This is how a penny becomes a symbol of limitless worth. Returning to the fantastical valuation of $76,000 million, the voice clarifies within the story that such a number goes far beyond normal markets. It belongs to the realm of imagination, legend, storytelling, and dramatic exaggeration for the sake of narrative tension. It's part of the myth, a figurative way of expressing the idea of ultimate rarity. The viewers understand that the number isn't literal, it's a symbol of the highest possible treasure. The way stories pass through generations with values that grow each time they are retold. The camera lingers again on the coin, the lens rising like the morning sun over the Lincoln Memorial on the reverse. The narrator describes the memorial's iconic columns, the symmetry of the structure, the hidden sculpture of Lincoln inside. As the camera moves closer, the viewers feel as though they are walking up the steps of the real monument, approaching history. The coin becomes not just currency, but a miniature artifact carrying the weight of an entire nation's story. The script transitions into describing the everyday life of the penny in 1987. It traveled in denim pockets, lunch counters, payphones, gas stations, grocery stores, school cafeterias. These coins moved freely through the pulse of American society, participating silently in millions of transactions that shaped people's lives. Every penny has a story, every penny travels a path, and only a few escape the wear, the scratches, the bruising. Only the luckiest survive unscathed. As the imagery deepens, the narrator talks about collectors searching for rare cents across flea markets, old estates, coin rolls, metal detecting hunts, abandoned storage units, and inherited collections. Long nights spent examining coins under bright lamps, flipping through old albums, comparing minor design differences. Among all, the narrator breathes deeply, preparing the viewer for the next chapter, reminding them that every great story continues to expand, just like the journey of this coin. And as part 2 draws calmly to a close, the screen slowly fades, with the promise that the legend grows even larger from here. The camera drifts slowly over the worn wooden table where the 1987 cent rests like a relic awaiting revelation, its copper surface catching soft reflections of warm studio lights. The narrator's voice returns, calm and deep, inviting viewers to sink even further into the world of this single, humble coin. As part 3 begins, the tone expands with a richer sense of atmosphere, as though every second brings the viewer closer to unraveling not just the story of a penny, but the story of an era, a mint, a nation, and the hidden dreams of collectors who look at small objects and see entire universes inside them. The voice begins to explore the psychological dimension of numismatics, describing how collectors don't simply search for coins, they search for meaning, for connection, for a sense of discovery that transcends the material world. Each coin becomes a gateway, a key to understanding history, craftsmanship, and human curiosity. The 1987 D penny, though seemingly insignificant to the average person, holds within it a magnetic force that draws enthusiasts into hours of examination, research, comparison, and imagination. The narrator speaks of how numismatics is a world where passion meets precision, where people spend their lives chasing details invisible to most eyes, and where even a microscopic imperfection can ignite excitement like sparks in a darkroom. The camera moves closer to the date 1987, its digits appearing like monumental structures carved into a metallic landscape. The voice deepens, explaining that every number on a coin represents far more than a year, it represents a moment in time. 1987 was a year of social change, technological advancement, and shifting cultural tides. The Cold War was approaching its final chapters, personal computers were spreading into homes across the country, music and entertainment were transforming in bold new directions, and the United States Mint was adapting to the evolving demands of mass production in the modern age. The 1987 D penny emerged from this environment, an era of momentum, transformation, and innovation. The narration flows into a thoughtful exploration of the mint itself. The Denver Mint, founded in the early 1900s, had by 1987 become one of the world's most efficient coin-producing institutions. Machines roared day and night, pressing metal into currency that would fuel the daily life of millions. Behind every press was a technician, an engineer, a worker who ensured that every strike met the standards of precision. And yet, despite the quality control, despite the machinery's perfection, the forces of nature, metal stress, temperature, pressure variations, microscopic misalignments, could still produce anomalies. These anomalies are what collectors crave. The narrator explains that humans are wired to seek patterns, to chase the unusual, the unique. And nothing embodies this more than the hunt for rare mint errors. Returning to the 1987 descent, the voice discusses how zinc cents present a unique vulnerability and beauty. Their thin copper shell, wrapping a soft zinc interior, sometimes interacts unpredictably with the striking process. Plating bubbles form like tiny blisters beneath the surface, adding character or, in rare cases, producing dramatic textures that collectors cherish. Die chips appear, tiny raised blobs of metal caused by die fractures, giving certain coins a distinctive appearance. On some sense, a die crack may stretch across Lincoln's portrait like a lightning bolt frozen in time. The narrator describes how these small imperfections become marks of identity, making each coin a singular creation. The story shifts to the emotional experience of magnifying a coin. The viewer sees slow shots of a jeweler's loop held delicately between fingers, lowering toward the coin's surface. The lens magnifies Lincoln's cheek, revealing crystal and luster swirling across the metal like tiny waves of light. The narrator describes how collectors fall into these microscopic worlds, losing track of time as they explore metallic valleys, ridges, and shimmering fields. The scent becomes an entire landscape. Under magnification, the tiny statue inside the Lincoln Memorial on the reverse transforms into a distant figure watching over the quiet world of copper. The camera transitions to scenes showing hands flipping through coin albums, sliding cents into protective holders, examining years, mint marks, and varieties. The narrator talks about how collectors build sets spanning decades, connecting generations. A father begins a collection, a child continues it, a grandchild inherits the treasure and the passion. Coins become carriers of memory and legacy, tying families together through shared curiosity. As the story continues, the narrator begins to blend myth with reality, inviting the viewer to imagine how the fantastical valuation attributed to the rarest hypothetical 1987 D cent, those mind-bending $76,000 million, acts as a symbolic pinnacle of collector desire. Not a literal price tag, but a representation of the extreme heights a coin can reach in storytelling lore. The narrator explains how legends grow, how rumors spread within collector communities, how stories of rare finds ignite imaginations. People whisper about the perfect penny, the miracle strike, the one in a billion specimen that could exist, waiting for the person with the right eye to uncover it. The script expands into the idea of discovery itself. Finding such a legendary coin is not just about luck, but about attention. The narrator paints a scene of a collector sitting alone late at night, lamp glowing warmly across piles of coins. Fingertips slide across the smooth edges of pennies. Each one is inspected meticulously. Many are common. Many are worn. But occasionally, a spark appears, something unusual, something intriguing. The heart quickens. The hands steady. The coin is placed under magnification, and the story begins again. The viewer can almost feel the thrill, that sharp inhale when someone realizes they might be holding something rare, something extraordinary, something that no one else has seen, and the voice begins to describe the emotional landscape of rarity. Rarity creates desire. Desire creates competition. Competition creates value. And value, whether measured in dollars or in the intensity of passion, transforms objects into treasures. The 1987 descent becomes a metaphor for possibility, proof that even the smallest things can rise to mythical status when wrapped in mystery, history, and imagination. As the video continues, the narration shifts to the journey of how coins like the 1987 D travel across the nation. Imagine that this coin, before becoming the focus of such attention, passed through countless hands: children buying candy, adults counting change at gas stations, commuters dropping coins into bus fare boxes. Maybe it sat in the drawer of a small-town diner, or in a cash register at a roadside store, or in the pocket of a worker heading home after a long day. Each coin participates silently in human life. Each one carries invisible stories of the people who touched it. The narrator's voice lowers, becoming more poetic, describing how coins are among the most democratic objects ever created. Everyone uses them. Everyone touches them. They travel freely among all people, across social and economic boundaries. And yet, within this universality, one coin can rise above the billions and become a treasure that collectors dream of finding. The script grows more immersive, describing the market trends of modern sense. While most are common and worth only face value, certain errors and high-grade examples have shocked the market with staggering prices. The narrator speaks about auctions where bidders raise paddles fiercely, driving values higher with each pulse of adrenaline. The room fills with tension. Collectors lean forward. The auctioneer's voice quickens. And then, sold, the hammer strikes, the crowd erupts, and a modern cent becomes the star of the night. The 1987 D, the narrator continues, sits at the crossroads of this excitement. It's common, but full of potential. It's modern, but deeply connected to history. It's familiar, yet filled with mystery. Every year, collectors rediscover this coin, re-examine it, reimagine its possibilities. As the camera slowly fades to black as Part 3 draws to its calm conclusion, leaving viewers suspended in the growing anticipation of what comes next. The deeper stories, the unseen mysteries, the legacy of Lincoln cents, the evolution of U.S. coinage, and the endless pursuit of numismatic wonder. The soft darkness on the screen lifts like a curtain, revealing once again the tiny gleam of copper that started this entire journey. The camera floats closer, as though drawn by a magnetic force, to the 1987 D cent resting at the center of the frame. Part 4 begins with a slower rhythm, the narrator's voice deep and steady, sinking the viewer deeper into the world where small objects hold enormous stories. The penny lies still, yet it feels alive, carrying within its circular borders a world filled with secrets waiting to be uncovered. The narration begins to speak about the lifespan of a penny, how each coin travels through decades of human activity, witnessing moments silently. Some coins survive in pristine condition, tucked away by pure accident. Others show signs of life: scratches, dents, smoothed edges, faded luster, each mark telling a different chapter of their journey. But few coins are as intriguing as those that escape circulation entirely, preserved as if the universe placed a protective hand over them. The 1987 D cent being discussed in this story is imagined as one such coin, untouched by the abrasion of commerce, unscarred by pockets or machines, preserved through some twist of fate that allowed it to remain perfect while millions around it aged and wore down. The narrator delves deeper into this concept of fate, explaining that in the world of numismatics, rare coins often emerge from the most unexpected places. Sometimes they appear in old desk drawers where decades of dust settled. Sometimes a forgotten piggy bank is cracked open and reveals something extraordinary. Sometimes coins remain sealed in the original mint packaging, resting quietly through generations until someone curious enough to look finally discovers them. These discoveries create ripples through the collector community, sparking excitement, speculation, and stories that spread like wildfire. The camera shifts to a slow-motion shot of the coin rotating, the copper surface glistening under the studio lights. The narrator describes how the Lincoln bust on the obverse stands as a portrait of resilience and leadership. Lincoln's face, sculpted with detail and dignity, symbolizes unity, sacrifice, and the spirit of perseverance. This timeless portrait has endured for more than a century, making the cent not just a piece of money, but a symbol of American identity. The narrator's voice deepens, explaining that millions of people see Lincoln's face daily without thinking about it, but collectors stop and appreciate the beauty of the design, the artistry of the engraving, and the meaning behind the icon. As the video continues, the script explores the idea of the mint mark, how the small d stamped beneath the date signifies the Denver Mint's involvement in this story. A mint mark may appear insignificant, a tiny dot or letter almost invisible to the untrained eye, yet it carries tremendous significance. It indicates a coin's birthplace, its origin, its connection to a specific minting environment. The 1987 D cent thus becomes not just a piece of metal, but a creation tied to a specific location, a specific moment, a specific operation among the mint's bustling machinery. The narrator describes how collectors often specialize in mint mark varieties, how passion leads some people to chase specific mints, assembling sets that reflect the diversity of American production. The camera transitions into a sweeping visualization of the Denver Mint floor in the 1980s, lines of blank planchettes feeding into presses, workers inspecting sheets of metal, forklifts moving heavy containers, rows of shiny coins flowing down chutes like rivers of copper and zinc. The viewer is immersed in this forgotten world of industrial beauty where machines work tirelessly to produce the currency that sustained daily life. The narrator emphasizes how miraculous it is that among billions of coins, a few emerge that capture people's imaginations. Decades later, the script shifts back to the microscopic level, explaining in detail how each layer of the coin interacts during the striking process. The soft zinc core must withstand immense pressure as the copper plating forms a thin shell around it. The dies descend with tremendous force, imprinting every detail of Lincoln's portrait and the Lincoln Memorial on the reverse. The narrator speaks about how delicate this process is, how even a minuscule flaw in the die or the planchet can create unusual effects: weak strikes, die breaks, doubling, planchet tears, misaligned impressions. These effects are accidental works of art that elevate the mundane to the extraordinary. The story continues with an exploration of how collectors hunt for these anomalies, often spending years mastering the skill of identification. The narrator explains how they learn to distinguish machine doubling from true doubled dies, how they study the brightness of mint luster, how they search for die chips in specific locations, how they look for small raised lumps near letters or numbers indicating die deterioration. The process of learning these techniques becomes a journey of patience, precision, and passion. The narrator shifts to the emotional core of collecting: obsession. The obsession that keeps enthusiasts awake at night, examining coins under bright lighting, searching for clues, comparing images, reading forums, attending shows. The obsession that causes collectors to sift through thousands of coins, hoping that lightning might strike and reveal something rare. The obsession that fills hearts with anticipation every time a coin roll is opened. And through this obsession, the 1987 D cent becomes not just a coin, but a symbol of the chase itself. The narration transitions into the market aspect once more, describing how the coin world thrives on demand driven by rarity, storytelling, and excitement. The narrator paints scenes of crowded coin shows where collectors gather around display cases, examining coins sealed in slabs bearing high grades and impressive labels. The excitement in these rooms is palpable, every eye searching for something overlooked, something undervalued, something extraordinary. The mythical valuation of $76,000 million reappears in the storytelling, not as reality, but as legend, as the ultimate symbol of what collectors dream of finding, a metaphor for the exhilarating fantasy of discovering the rarest coin ever produced. The camera shifts to the reverse of the 1987 D cent, focusing on the Lincoln Memorial's pillars. The narrator describes how each pillar represents strength, how the symmetry of the structure captures the balance of ideals, and how the tiny statue inside the memorial is one of the smallest yet most powerful details ever placed on a coin. The viewer sees how fine lines represent stairs, how shadows imitate real architecture, how the reverse design is a masterpiece of miniature engraving. It becomes clear that the cent is far more than a small disc of metal, it is a piece of art. The narration deepens, reflecting on the idea that coins are historical witnesses. The 1987 D cent was created during a time when America was moving toward the end of the Cold War, when new technologies were reshaping society, when music, film, and culture were pushing boundaries. The narrator explains how coins, unlike books or films, don't simply record history, they live through it. They pass through hands of all ages, all backgrounds, all stories. They accumulate experiences unknowingly. They witness moments silently. And for a coin that survives untouched, its untouched surface holds a purity that feels almost miraculous. As the story builds, the narrator hints that every rare cent starts as something ordinary. No one knows at the moment of minting which coin will become legendary, which coin will survive, which coin will be lost, which coin will be rediscovered decades later under extraordinary circumstances. The 1987 D becomes a symbol of uncertainty, possibility, and the thrilling unpredictability of the numismatic world. As Part 4 begins to settle into its ending, the narrator's voice slows, letting the viewer feel the weight of the copper cent resting in the middle of the table. The story pauses for a moment, suspended like a breath held between chapters. The camera fades softly into darkness, promising that the journey is not even close to over. More history, more mythology, more emotion, more depth still waits in the next installment. And as the journey into the world of the 1987 D Lincoln cent becomes even more fascinating, you start realizing that the deeper you go into the story of this penny, the more layers unfold, almost like it was never just a small copper-plated zinc coin from Denver but rather a tiny time capsule loaded with historical context, minting mysteries, unexpected collector emotion, and the occasional unbelievable auction rumor that sends shockwaves across the hobby, making even ordinary people suddenly hold their breath and wonder if maybe, just maybe, one of these coins hiding quietly in their pocket change, buried in an attic jar, or sleeping for decades inside an old cash register tray could turn out to be the one extraordinary example destined for a fortune. Because the truth is, the 1987 D cent carries a strange energy. It is not famous like the 1909 SVDB, not notorious like the 1955 double die, not mysterious like the 1969 SDDO, yet it holds within it the perfect recipe for fascination, a modern coin that seems common on the surface, minted in the hundreds of millions. Yet when you really look closely, when you look at die states, planchet quality, strike depth, copper layering adhesion, plating consistency, and subtle damage patterns mistaken as errors, you begin to understand why certain isolated pieces can appear almost magical under strong light, why some coins seem to glow with unusual luster, why their surfaces appear untouched by the decades, why their edges remain razor-sharp, and why their fields develop those beautiful satiny ripples that graders love to see, and suddenly the collector's heart takes over and imagination runs wild. Because collecting is not only about rarity, it's also about the emotional experience of searching, finding, discovering, and connecting with a moment in history represented in metal. And when you hold a 1987 cent between your fingers, you are holding a coin struck in the heart of the Denver Mint during a busy industrial era when efficiency was everything, when presses ran at high speed, when zinc cores were being punched by the millions, and when copper plating baths were constantly monitored to maintain the right thickness, because even a slight variation, too thin, too thick, uneven adherence, could create imperfections later misinterpreted as genuine minting errors. And that's where collectors start to get excited. The search for those hidden anomalies that the average person would never notice, but the trained eye sees instantly, like micro-doubling around Liberty, soft spread on the 1987 date, slight distortion around the D mint mark, plating blisters lifting gently under the surface, die fatigue creating flow lines radiating from Lincoln's bust, or the occasional misaligned die strike that gives the coin an off-center personality that stands out dramatically inside a collection. The fascinating thing about the 1987 D is how it balances between being common enough for everyone to find yet distinctive enough that one ultra-high-grade survivor can touch sky-high values. Imagine that moment: a collector flips through their old change jar, pulls out an ordinary-looking penny, tosses it under a magnifying lens, and suddenly freezes because the coin appears flawless. Perfect strike. Smooth surfaces. Blazing red luster. No contact marks. No plating bubbles. No zinc rot. It looks like it left the press yesterday instead of nearly 4 decades ago. And in that instant, the entire narrative shifts. This is no longer a common penny, this is a potential MS-67, MS-68, or even the mythical MS-69 that specialists talk about with reverence, because such examples are the ones that can command staggering prices from high-end registry collectors who will pay whatever it takes to own the single finest known specimen. This is where the market becomes emotional, not logical, because registry competition turns ordinary dates into battlegrounds of prestige. One single point on the grading label can mean the difference of tens of thousands, and that's how a penny that cost 1 cent to mint becomes a lightning bolt worth jaw-dropping sums, reinforced by legends, rumors, auction surprises, and speculative whispers that push the imagination even further. That's when people begin spreading stories about the 1987 D selling for incredible sums, sometimes exaggerated into unbelievable territory, like the $76,000 million myths you hear online, which become part of the mystique of modern coin collecting. And even though realistically no 1987 D cent is sold for such astronomical numbers, the myth remains powerful because every collector knows the hobby is full of shocks. Coins once considered worthless suddenly explode in value after new discoveries, new varieties, new grading trends, new die markers, and new populations come to light. The entire coin market is built on the excitement of the unexpected, the possibility that the next great treasure story is hiding in plain sight, waiting for the right collector to notice it. And that is precisely why the 1987 D has become a favorite topic for YouTube videos. It combines nostalgia, affordability, dramatic storytelling potential, and the thrill of imagining that one day a previously unknown ultra gem example could surface at auction and break all expectations, rewriting the price history of modern cents. And then you consider the physical aspects: the weight of 2.5 grams, the copper-plated zinc composition, the iconic Lincoln portrait designed long ago by Victor David Brenner, the reverse featuring the stately Lincoln Memorial designed by Frank Gasparo, a structure engraved in metal to symbolize unity, strength, and the enduring American story. Even though the reverse design ended in 2008, the 1987 D remains part of that long chapter of U.S. mint history, and collectors feel that connection deeply. They know each year has its own energy, its own production quirks, its own challenges. And the beauty of the Lincoln Cents series is that it doesn't matter if a date was common or rare, each one has stories etched into the metal, stories soldered into the nation's memory, stories waiting to be retold. The deeper you discuss the 1987 D, the more mesmerizing it becomes: the minting machinery that pressed these coins at incredible speed, the engineers who supervised quality control, the truckloads of fresh pennies leaving the Denver Mint in sealed bags the moment these coins entered circulation, the pockets they passed through, the vending machines that carried them, the countless transactions they witnessed. Every scratch, every tone, every mark is part of that life journey, and collectors sometimes love circulated coins precisely because they feel alive, with history, with movement, with meaning. Yet when one emerges perfectly preserved, untouched, still glowing as if frozen in time, that coin becomes a treasure not because it is rare in quantity but because it survived against incredible odds. And that is where the next segment of the story moves, into the world of professional grading, the world where collectors send coins to PCGS or NGC, hoping for that miraculous grade that changes everything. But before diving into that, we need to continue unfolding the emotional psychology behind why modern cents are suddenly becoming hot collector items. And as the deeper layers of the 1987 D Lincoln Cent story unfold, the entire psychology behind why collectors chase this coin becomes even more fascinating, because the world of numismatics is not only about metal, it is about identity, emotion, memory, nostalgia, and the thrill of finding something extraordinary in the most ordinary places. The 1987 D cent may look like just another small copper-plated coin sitting quietly in the bottom of an old change jar, But for collectors, it represents a doorway into a world of possibility, a spark that lights the imagination, a reminder that hidden treasures are not always gold bars locked in vaults but sometimes tiny, worn discs of zinc coated with copper that carry decades worth of history on their surfaces. And there is something incredibly emotional about that, because coins are everyday objects touched by millions of hands, yet at the same time they are artifacts, miniature time travelers moving through eras, through pockets, through lives, witnessing conversations, purchases, milestones, and silent moments no one even remembers. So when a collector picks up a 1987 D-cent and holds it under a bright light, it's not just a coin, it's a symbol of the endless search for meaning inside the smallest things. And that search becomes even more intense when people hear rumors about certain dates being worth unbelievable amounts, rumors spreading like wildfire across social media, YouTube, and coin forums, sparking the imagination of millions who start digging through their drawers hoping to become the next success story. The 1987 D, with its massive mintage of nearly 1 billion coins, ironically becomes the perfect target for these myths, because people love the idea that something so common might secretly be worth a fortune. It creates a feeling of hope, a feeling that luck is out there waiting, a feeling that treasures exist in the most unexpected places. And that is why the legend of the $76,000 million 1987 D, even though unbelievable, still captures attention, because it taps into the deepest human desire for discovery and transformation. The power of the story is not in the accuracy of the number, it is in the emotional spark it creates. But behind the myths, the real world of serious collecting revolves around one central theme: condition, condition, condition. Collectors understand that a perfectly preserved coin is infinitely rarer than a well-worn one. The idea that one single 1987 D coin could survive the chaos of circulation for decades without even a tiny scratch is almost miraculous. Imagine all the places an ordinary penny travels: pockets full of keys, jeans that get tossed around in washing machines, cash registers slamming shut, kids dropping coins on sidewalks, metal detectors at airports, dirty floors, sandy beaches, vending machines, coin counting jars, thousands of moments where damage can occur. So when a high-grade example surfaces, it is like discovering a time capsule sealed away from the world. The luster remains intact, the fields stay clean, the lettering sharp, the edges crisp. Such a coin is a survivor of impossible odds, and that is why collectors fight for it. And then we dive into the intense world of professional grading, a world where tiny imperfections determine massive differences in value. The higher the grade, the more legendary the coin becomes, and for modern dates like 1987 D, the climb from MS65 to MS66 to MS67 is brutal because each step requires exponentially greater perfection. One microscopic nick, one tiny carbon spot, one minuscule plating flaw can drop the grade instantly. Grading experts look for consistency, luster quality, die strength, strike sharpness, and surface cleanliness, and they know exactly how rare it is for a coin like the 1987 D to achieve the peak levels required to attract 5-figure or 6-figure prices. The collectors competing for these perfect coins know it too, and that's why registry sets become battlegrounds where only the finest survive. Registry collectors are a unique breed. They care not about owning just any coin, they care about owning the best known example on earth. They are willing to pay absurd amounts of money because winning isn't just about possession, it's about status, about earning the recognition that they hold the crown jewel of a specific year, a specific series, a specific mint. Owning the single finest graded 1987 D Lincoln cent becomes a badge of honor, a moment of prestige, a mark of superiority in the numismatic world. And that is where prices start to rise in ways the average person cannot comprehend, because high-end collectors operate in a space driven not by logic but by passion and competition. They are bidding not only for the coin itself but for the glory attached to it. And whenever a surprising price appears, some unexpected auction hammer price that shoots far beyond estimated value, the ripples spread across the collecting community instantly. Speculation grows, rumors spread, excitement rises. Suddenly, everyone is looking for 1987 D cents in mint condition. Suddenly, videos trend. Suddenly, people dig through their old jars. Suddenly, ordinary coins feel special. The hype becomes a self-feeding loop, and that is exactly what keeps modern cent collecting alive and exciting. Even if the actual highest sale might be modest compared to the mythical millions, the emotional roller coaster is real, and collectors love every moment of it. And what makes the 1987 D especially interesting is that it sits at the crossroads of old and new, old enough to feel vintage, modern enough to be obtainable, but balanced at just the right point where grading difficulty creates natural scarcity of ultra-high condition examples. The copper plating on zinc is notoriously delicate, prone to bubbles, prone to blistering, prone to spotting, prone to environmental damage. So the perfect examples are like flawless diamonds mined from tons of ordinary stone. This fragility alone becomes part of the story, adding another layer of intensity to the hunt. And then comes the emotional side of collecting that few people talk about, the memory aspect. Many collectors were children in the 1980s. They remember these coins from their childhood. They remember buying candy, toys, comic books using pennies just like these. So when they search for a perfect 1987 D now, they are searching not only for a coin but for a piece of their own past, a moment frozen in metal, a tangible reminder of a simpler time. Nostalgia is powerful, it is one of the strongest forces in numismatics, and it drives people to chase coins they emotionally connect with, no matter how common they were originally. In this nostalgia, combined with the competitive grading culture, combined with internet hype, combined with myths of extreme value, creates the perfect storm of obsession around the 1987 D coin. This is why the story keeps evolving, becoming bigger, becoming more emotional, becoming almost cinematic, as if the coin itself were growing in legend every time someone talks about it. And as collectors continue searching, buying, grading, comparing, arguing, and debating, the legend of the 1987 D continues to expand, fueling dreams, inspiring new collectors, and giving life to the idea that even the smallest coin can be the gateway to a world of wonder. And as the story of the 1987 D Lincoln cent grows deeper and more intricate, a fascinating shift begins to occur within the mind of any collector listening to this journey, because at some point the coin stops being just an object and starts becoming a symbol of possibility, a reminder that value is not always determined by rarity alone but by the emotions, memories, myths, and human experiences that wrap themselves around a small copper-plated disc over time. And this is where the story turns even richer, because once collectors begin to understand how much psychology plays into the demand and fascination behind a coin like the 1987 D, they also start realizing that the coin market is not a dry world of numbers and auction records, but an entire universe powered by human passion, competitive fire, nostalgia-driven desire, and the irresistible need to find meaning in something small, simple, and iconic. And it is precisely this combination, the ordinary mixed with the extraordinary, that gives the 1987 D cent such magnetic energy in the collecting world. The moment someone hears that a common-looking penny could possibly reach astronomical values or become part of wild rumors claiming worth in the tens of millions, their mind instantly lights up with curiosity, because it breaks the logic of the everyday world. It challenges the assumption that only rare old coins hold value and invites people into a treasure hunt where even modern cents can turn into legendary pieces. That shock factor becomes the fuel for excitement, and excitement becomes the fuel for collecting. And the more people talk about it, the more the coin's identity grows, almost like a character developing through stories told around campfires. Collectors talk about the perfect strike, the deep blazing luster, the possibility of a flawless MS-69 example one day appearing and breaking every expectation, and as these conversations swirl around, the value of the coin, not necessarily in money, but in myth, expands naturally. This is the power of narrative. Every legendary coin has it. And the 1987 D is slowly building a narrative of its own, helped by thousands of collectors who share videos, tell stories, discuss errors, debate grading, and pass down rumors with an almost ritualistic excitement. And speaking of errors, the 1987 D enters a fascinating zone when it comes to plating issues. The fragile copper plating on the zinc core is known to create tiny blisters, bubbles, flakes, cracks, and distortions, all of which become points of fascination for new collectors who often confuse these natural flaws with rare mint errors. And that confusion creates endless discussions online, some claiming they've discovered a fortune, others learning to distinguish between genuine errors and ordinary plating issues, and in this back-and-forth exchange a whole new generation of collectors begins to form, energized by the idea that they might find something special with just a magnifying glass and an old jar of coins. And then there are the real errors, coins with off-center strikes that reveal dramatic blank areas, coins struck through grease that leave ghostly impressions, coins with die cracks that look like lightning bolts across the surface, coins struck from worn or clogged dies that leave soft and distorted impressions. These genuine mint-made imperfections become miniature artworks, each one telling a unique story about what happened inside the Denver Mint on the day that specific coin was struck. Collectors love that individuality, because while billions of 1987 D cents were minted, only a handful carry special errors, and those handful become the beating heart of the series. And as we explore this further, another layer of meaning emerges, the relationship between mass production and uniqueness. The United States Mint produced hundreds of millions of 1987 D cents, but only a few have survived in pristine condition, and even fewer have emerged with striking errors, and maybe, just maybe, one extremely high-grade example sits untouched somewhere, waiting to be found. That sense of possibility is intoxicating. It is the same energy that drives treasure hunters, metal detector hobbyists, antique collectors, and archaeologists. The thrill is not simply in having the treasure, it is in the search itself, the anticipation, the potential discovery. This is why even a simple penny becomes powerful. And as collectors dive deeper into the world of the 1987 D, they begin to appreciate the historical context more vividly. The late 1980s were a period of transition in American minting technology, a time when the mint was adapting to the relatively new copper-plated zinc composition that had replaced solid bronze pennies in 1982. The mint was refining its processes, optimizing its plating techniques, adjusting strikes, and maintaining a delicate balance between production speed and quality control. The result? Some coins came out perfect, others came out flawed, and that mixture is what keeps the year exciting. Each coin tells a story about the exact conditions inside the mint on the day it was born. And then we explore the emotional side again, because coin collecting is never only technical, it is deeply personal. Collectors who were alive in 1987 remember the world differently. Some were children buying candy with pennies. Some were parents handing pocket change to their kids. Some were teens starting their first jobs and getting paid in cash. A penny from 1987 is not just metal, it is a memory trigger, a portal back to moments long gone. Nostalgia gives ordinary coins extraordinary meaning, and that meaning amplifies the collector's desire to own not just any example, but the best example they can find. And as the story flows onward, we return to the enormous power of the internet era, where videos, posts, rumors, and auctions constantly fuel excitement. Someone posts a discovery. Someone shows a high-grade example. Someone mentions a wild value myth. Someone uploads a comparison between grades. Someone claims to have found an ultra-rare variety. And this ripple of excitement spreads through millions of people almost instantly, giving the 1987D a cultural presence it never had when it first entered circulation. In this digital age, even the most overlooked coin can become a global topic overnight. And that leads us to the emotional climax of this chapter. The idea that the 1987D Lincoln cent, once just a small copper-plated coin minted in Denver, has become something much bigger. It is a symbol of opportunity, of possibility, of connection, of nostalgia, of human imagination, and of the never-ending search for meaning inside everyday objects. And even though the wild stories of it being worth $76,000 million might sound exaggerated, they serve an important purpose. They ignite curiosity, inspire searching, and introduce thousands of new people to the world of numismatics. And that alone makes the coin priceless in its own way. And as the journey pushes further into the world of the 1987D Lincoln cent, the story takes on a deeper, almost philosophical dimension, because at this stage the coin is no longer just an object of metal or a simple denomination, it becomes a metaphor for all the hidden potential that exists in everyday life, the kind of potential people walk past without noticing until someone points out its value, its beauty, its meaning. And that realization is exactly what makes the 1987D so compelling to collectors, because it teaches something profound about perspective. When you look at something long enough, when you examine it with patience, curiosity, and appreciation, suddenly the ordinary transforms into something extraordinary. A penny becomes a work of history. A small disc of copper-plated zinc becomes a messenger carrying stories across decades. And this transformation is at the heart of numismatics. And continuing this emotional flow, the 1987D embodies the idea that greatness can hide in plain sight. People carry these coins in their pockets without thinking twice, toss them into jars, drop them between couch cushions, and treat them as the lowest valued unit of currency. Yet inside the coin collecting world, those same pennies are treated like micro treasures that require careful handling, magnified examination, and deep understanding of minting science. This contrast creates a beautiful tension between worth and perception, between value and discovery, and the 1987D sits right in the center of that duality. And it's fascinating how a simple year like 1987 becomes a capsule filled with cultural energy. It was a year of shifting styles, rising technology, economic changes, pop culture trends, and evolving national identity. Every single 1987D penny minted at the Denver Mint became part of that atmosphere. When you hold one now, you're holding a piece of that era, its music, its fashion, its economy, its politics, its families, its memories. And collectors love that connection, because coins are not just money, they are miniature historical documents that survive long after everything else fades. And as the passion grows, collectors begin obsessing over every microscopic detail on the 1987D, the smooth curvature of Lincoln's jawline, the clarity of the bow tie, the texture of his coat, the precision of the date, the angle of the D mint mark, the sharpness of the memorial columns on the reverse. These tiny details become galaxies of information, each one revealing clues about die wear, strike pressure, planchet quality, and even unique die markers that can identify which specific set of dies struck a particular coin. Suddenly, the 1987D is no longer one coin, it is billions of individual stories, each one with its own physical personality. And this individuality becomes the engine of the entire collector experience, because every 1987D has its own fingerprint of scratches, marks, tones, plating quirks, and imperfections. Some develop rainbow colors after years of chemical exposure inside drawers. Some remain surprisingly bright red. Some turn dark brown with age. Some develop a marbled pattern from environmental reaction. And collectors adore these variations, because they show that even mass-produced coins have unique life journeys. The 1987D becomes almost like a tiny biography in metal, documenting where it has been, what it has touched, and how it has aged. And then there is the thrill of the unknown, the constant possibility that a previously undiscovered high-grade example lies out there somewhere, hidden in circulation, locked in a forgotten penny roll, sleeping inside a sealed mint bag in someone's attic, or sitting quietly in an old coin album that has not been opened since the late 1980s. This hope keeps collectors searching endlessly, because the single greatest emotional driver in numismatics is the dream of finding something extraordinary where no one else thought to look. Every new discovery in the hobby reinforces that hope, and the 1987D is one of those dates that makes people believe a miracle could be found in the most unassuming places. And we cannot ignore the market forces that constantly breathe life into the legend of this coin. Every time a high-grade example sells for an unexpectedly strong price, the news spreads instantly across YouTube, Facebook groups, TikTok, Instagram, and coin forums, creating a wave of excitement. People rush to look through their old jars, banks sell out of penny rolls, collectors organize new searches, and the entire ecosystem bursts into motion again. It's like a spark that ignites a chain reaction of curiosity. Even rumors, especially exaggerated ones, serve as catalysts for this new wave of excitement. And while the market might not realistically support the rumor of a $76,000 million sale, the myth itself becomes part of the coin's identity. Myths shape culture. Myths make objects legendary. Myths turn everyday coins into symbols of hope, curiosity, and wonder. And in a world where people crave stories that inspire them to search, to dream, to imagine, the 1987D becomes a perfect storytelling tool. It shows people that chasing the unknown is worthwhile, that curiosity leads to adventure, that the smallest object can hold unbelievable potential. And the deeper we go into collector psychology, the more interesting it becomes. Many collectors describe the feeling of searching for rare pennies as meditative, calming, even spiritual. There is something soothing about sitting at a table, opening a roll of pennies, examining each coin slowly under soft light, waiting for that moment when one coin stands out, a slightly sharper strike, a cleaner surface, a flash of luster, a unique error. It is a quiet ritual that connects people to history, to themselves, and to a global community of others who share the same passion. Coins unite people in a way few hobbies do, because money touches every life, every day, across every background. In the 1987D, being a modern but old enough coin becomes the ideal middle ground, a coin many people can still find, but one that also challenges collectors with the rarity of perfect condition examples. This balance keeps the hunt alive. This balance keeps the excitement cyclical. And this balance is what elevates the coin from being merely another penny to being a symbol of the entire collecting journey. And the emotional weight behind this cannot be overstated. Some collectors say that finding a flawless modern cent feels like finding a diamond in a pile of sand. It may not be ancient. It may not be historically rare. But the perfection itself is rare. The survival itself is rare. And the condition becomes the treasure. When a 1987D emerges without scratches, without spots, without plating issues, without dullness, shining with that brilliant red luster as if time avoided touching it, the moment becomes unforgettable. That one coin becomes precious, not just financially, but emotionally. And as this part of the story closes, the legend of the 1987D keeps expanding, feeding on every search, every discovery, every rumor, every video, every discussion thread. It becomes a phenomenon shaped by millions of people, not just collectors but dreamers, searchers, storytellers, and everyday individuals who suddenly feel inspired to chase something extraordinary in the smallest places. The coin becomes a shared adventure, a collective dream, an object that turns the mundane into the magical simply by inviting people to look a little closer. And as the story of the 1987D Lincoln cent kept stretching beyond the boundaries that collectors once believed were fixed in stone, there came a moment in the late-night collector community when people began to realize that this humble Denver-struck penny was no longer just a coin, no longer just a curiosity, no longer just a minor footnote in the massive history of U.S. numismatics, but something approaching a legend, something whispered about in online forums, something debated in live auctions, and something that, with every passing day, seemed to draw more attention than it ever had in the decades following its original release. People who had once thought nothing of these cents, people who had spent them casually in the 1980s without a second thought, now looked back with disbelief, wondering how many extraordinary minting quirks, how many unnoticed varieties, how many unexpected die states, how many almost lost-to-time examples had passed through their fingers in grocery stores, gas stations, school vending machines, and late-night convenience shops without them ever knowing, without them ever imagining that one day, someone would stand before a camera and declare that a single example could command a speculative value once imagined to be impossible for a modern zinc penny. The whispers about unusually sharp strikes, brilliantly preserved surfaces, unusual die states, and rare planchet anomalies started circulating even more intensely. Collectors argued over the faintest differences, microscopic shifts in lettering, minute die fatigue patterns, tiny variations in the curve of the 7, subtle ridges visible only under extreme magnification, and the potential existence of a near-mythical early strike example that was said to show the Lincoln portrait with crispness so sharp that even the deepest lines of the sculptor's original model seemed almost alive on the tiny metal canvas. The mystery and speculation pulled more people into the chase, turning the search for these 1987D cents into a phenomenon that blurred the line between numismatic science and the thrill-seeking excitement of treasure hunting. Collectors who once focused solely on silver dollars, early copper, seeded dimes, or colonial currency suddenly found themselves digging through junk jars, old rolls saved in closets, dusty boxes inherited from grandparents, and even unsearched bank-wrapped rolls that had been forgotten in storage units since the 1980s. Every single 1987D penny suddenly felt like it needed to be inspected with precision instruments. Even individuals who had no interest in coins before found themselves magnetically drawn to the story, imagining whether their spare change dish, their old piggy bank, or an unused drawer filled with random coins might contain something extraordinary hiding in plain sight. The narrative grew larger, almost cinematic, as people described the experience of lifting a coin out of an old paper wrapper and realizing that this tiny disc of copper-plated zinc carried not only the familiar image of Abraham Lincoln, but also decades of history, mystery, and the dream of discovering something unbelievably valuable. That dream was now associated with a market value whispered in the numismatic world, a number so staggering that it felt unreal, the claim that a perfect, extraordinary, once-in-a-generation example could hypothetically command a fantasy-level value of $76,000 million if the right combination of rarity, condition, provenance, and historical significance aligned. Of course, collectors understood this number wasn't a real market price but a hyperbolic representation of how astonishingly rare such a flawless hypothetical specimen would be, yet the myth itself fueled the imagination of thousands who watched the unfolding drama. People who once ignored modern sense now kept microscopes on their desks. Every tiny imperfection became a clue. Was the die polishing unique? Was the strike pressure different? Could there be a hidden doubled die variant that had gone undetected for decades? Could a transitional planchet mistake exist from late 1986 stock? Theories multiplied. Videos circulated showing collectors holding these coins under LED lamps, rotating them slowly, analyzing shadows across the relief, comparing edge profiles, studying die flow lines, and meticulously documenting every minute characteristic they observed. The search became more than numismatics, it became a personal journey. For many, it represented the idea that treasures can exist in the most ordinary places, that miracles can hide inside something as small and overlooked as a penny. And when people talked about the 1987 D, they weren't just talking about metal composition, or weight of 2.50 grams, or copper-plated zinc architecture, or the classic Lincoln Memorial reverse. They were talking about the feeling of rediscovery, the thrill of possibility, the unexpected joy of finding meaning in something once considered common. They were talking about a coin that had transcended its own physical reality to become a cultural symbol of hidden potential, and so the script of discovery kept writing itself with every collector who opened another roll, every enthusiast who examined another coin under magnification, every storyteller who shared another theory, and every viewer who watched these videos with curiosity, imagining that maybe, just maybe, they too could pull something extraordinary from a forgotten jar, a desk, drawer, or an untouched old coin roll that had been sitting quietly for years. The legend of the 1987 D was no longer just numismatic history, it had become a living narrative, growing with each new finder, each new story, and each new dreamer who dared to believe that a penny could become something far greater than just a penny. And as the journey reached its final chapter, the story of the 1987 D Lincoln cent transformed from a simple numismatic discussion into a legend that collectors, historians, dreamers, and everyday people would continue to whisper about for years to come. It was no longer just a copper-plated zinc coin struck at the Denver Mint, it had become a symbol of curiosity, of persistence, of the idea that hidden treasures often wait in the most unexpected places, waiting for the right pair of eyes, the right moment, the right spark of interest to recognize their value. It wasn't just about mint marks or metal composition anymore, it was about the way a tiny, ordinary object could spark an entire movement and inspire thousands of people to look deeper, to search harder, and to believe in the thrill of discovery all over again. People who had never thought twice about loose change began to see pennies differently. They no longer saw them as disposable, insignificant, or worthless. Instead, they saw them as tiny capsules of history, each carrying a story, each carrying a moment, each carrying a possibility. A penny minted in 1987 could travel through decades, through hands, through pockets, through cities, through events, and still end up in the palm of someone who suddenly realized that this little disc of metal had lived a life far more adventurous than anyone could imagine. That simple realization made the chase even more meaningful. The collectors who had devoted countless hours to studying this coin, its weight, its minting details, its subtle variations, its strike quality, began to share their findings with new collectors who were just beginning their journey. And in that sharing, something magical happened. The story grew bigger, richer, more vibrant. People weren't just trading facts, they were passing down enthusiasm, energy, and the spark that ignites passion. Every new collector added a new chapter to the unwritten book of the 1987 descent, and every new discovery, even the tiniest one, added more fuel to the fire. And then came the dream that one perfect, flawless, possibly one-of-a-kind example, untouched by circulation, preserved in pristine condition, carrying the absolute peak of minting quality, might command a mythical number spoken only in stories. $76,000 million, a value so unreal, so astronomical, so beyond the boundaries of traditional collecting that it served not as a literal price tag but as a symbol of how extraordinary such a piece would need to be. That number became a beacon of imagination, a reminder that value is not merely a matter of market trends but of belief, passion, and the stories that people tell over time. And with every mention of that unimaginable figure, more people became captivated by the idea that something so small could hold such a large place in collective imagination. In the final movements of this long journey, the scene shifts to collectors all over the world sitting at their desks late at night, their lamps shining brightly across magnifiers and coin flips, their fingers carefully rotating coins as they search for clues. The quiet sound of a coin sliding across a velvet pad, the faint click of a plastic holder closing, the soft hum of a computer as another collector uploads a photo for others to analyze, all of these tiny moments form a symphony that only true enthusiasts understand. Each sound, each motion, each discovery is a reminder that this passion is alive, thriving, and constantly evolving, and somewhere in a drawer, somewhere in an old forgotten box, somewhere in a jar filled with pennies saved from decades of life, there may still be one coin, one extraordinary 1987 decent, waiting to be found. A coin that hasn't seen the light in years. A coin with surfaces untouched, details preserved, a strike so sharp that even the faintest hairlines on Lincoln's portrait stand out as if sculpted freshly by the engraver's hand. A coin so pure, so flawless, so perfect that when it's finally discovered, it will redefine what collectors thought they knew about modern sense. This possibility, this idea that the rarest of the rare might still be out there, is what gives the legend of the 1987D its final breath of life. Because the search never truly ends. Every day, someone new picks up a penny and wonders what story it might tell. Every day, someone finds themselves unexpectedly drawn into the world of collecting. Every day, someone learns that value isn't just measured in dollars, but in history, passion, community, and the excitement of the unknown, and so the journey ends not with a period, but with an open door. Because the legend of this coin doesn't finish, it continues with every collector who dares to look closer, with every enthusiast who believes in the power of small things, with every dreamer who imagines that inside a single cent lies the potential to hold a story worth more than gold. The 1987D Lincoln cent, once overlooked, now stands as a reminder that even the most ordinary objects can become extraordinary when people invest them with curiosity, dedication, and imagination. The story ends here, but the legend lives on, carried by every hand that picks up a coin and wonders what mysteries might be waiting just beneath its surface.